following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. Canna Chat in the Zone. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. My co-host is Ryan Miller. He is present and accounted for. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for having me, Ralph.
My pleasure. I was just telling you off air how appreciative I am of what you taught me last week, that the word marijuana is a racial slur. And I have, like our guest today, Rich Moskowitz. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, welcome back. I've eliminated that, as have you, from my day-to-day vocabulary. Just given the knowledge is power. That's a blanket statement. It doesn't have to be cannabis. It could be anything you apply it to. Welcome back, Rich. We've got a lot to talk about. It's been about 45 days since the legalization of cannabis in California, and it was and has been legal for medical purposes for quite some time now. I think it's been about 8-9 years. And much to my dismay, I've got a medical card, and I did a little shopping over the last few weeks, and I found that most of the dispensaries in the Northern Bay Area locale, Bay in particular, that's where I shop, and we'll get into why I must shop in Oakland rather than Alameda another time or later on in the show. But I found the cupboards are almost bare, and I'd like you guys to elaborate on that. Can we start with Ryan?
All right, thank you. Good morning.
What you got?
Yes, well, I'm glad that you've been out there shopping and viewing in the marketplace, and I think you're right that there is going to be a shortage of licensed manufacturers, and so there is going to be some time it's going to take for the market to catch up with the demand. So the demand's increased significantly. We've allowed anyone over the age of 21 in California to purchase cannabis lawfully, and so we have to ensure that we create the pipeline of supply to satisfy that demand.
Well, they voted in November last, so there were 3 months between November and January, and these companies that are being, let's say disenfranchised, have been in business for a long time, and I don't understand why more preparation wasn't taken, because they knew there would be a demand, and why the medical community is being excluded first.
Well, I think we have to look at barriers to entry to the marketplace. It's the fees for applying for licenses are expensive. The real estate to have access to a site to cultivate or manufacture in a very limited green zone is a very contentious battle here in Oakland, for example, in the East Bay. So there's significant challenges in the bottleneck in the pipeline. One bottleneck, for example, is the equity bottleneck. I mean, it's a great program. The intentions are honorable and remarkable to rectify the harms of the racist war on drugs. However, when there's only one general license given out per one equity applicant, a matching system, we're finding that there's a shortage of equity applicants. So that's creating a bottleneck in the pipeline of the marketplace. So we need to expand equity, maybe to include military veterans, or to create a system parallel to equity for exclusively for military veterans, to create this marketplace with a greater sense of urgency.
Okay, you've identified the problem. Our guest, Rich Moskowitz, is kind of my maven in the business. Would you tell us what you think might be done to expedite the process and make it go as quickly as possible?
Sure, Ralph. I'll be glad to, but like I do with a lot of things, I'm going to reference back and expand the discussion a little bit because certainly you started by tagging the problem of a supply-side theoretical shortage. And I say it that way because there wasn't much change in the marketplace as far as production or demand. There seems to me to, as you stated, to be a problem getting products to the shelves, and the state's certainly working on that. But I think it all comes back to another inherent problem about this implementation of Prop 64. Actually, let me rephrase. It's not a problem with the implementation.
Yeah, I'm going to ask both of you. Would you speak up just a little bit? Speak into the phone.
Certainly.
I appreciate that. I'm getting a low sound reading.
It's not a problem with the implementation of 64. I ultimately believe that there was one tragic flaw in Prop 64. Without discussing all the ups and downs of the legislation, the one tragic flaw was in the combined legislation, we allowed the state to set aside any provision in Prop 64. Typically, when the citizens of the state have a proposition, it cannot be changed in any way. It cannot be changed by the legislature, and it cannot be changed by judicial interpretation. What we did in Prop 64 is we gave that power to the government. And no matter where you stand on the issues, my personal belief is as soon as you allow politics into a citizen's initiative, then you wind up with a manipulated outcome. So that being said, to address your direct question on how do we quickly resolve this, I think this is a multi-headed beast, and I urge people not to pass judgment right away. Remember, first, these are emergency regulations. Second, in each state that legalized recreational consumption, we saw initial supply chain problems, but over the longer time, we've seen a flooding of the market. So, as I say, I urge people not to jump to final decision right away. Secondly, I think that towards your end of medical, I think that Prop 64 enshrined in law each of our own right to grow, and we need to continue to push that because not everyone has the ability to grow, but we already have the right to give cannabis to other people. So my personal belief on addressing the medical market and even the recreational market is we all in the cannabis community, a lot of us understand business and with wide open eyes see the pluses and minuses that businesses have done in America over the last 10, 20, 30, 100, whatever years you'd like to review. And towards that end, I think that what we can do as a cannabis community is not only insert ourselves into a growing and giving medium, but besides that, we can also ensure that there's a different business standard in this industry. And for precedent, I simply point to things like nuclear power or power generation in total or transportation. There's always the public good that could put regulation on industry. And in this case, I'm a personal advocate for business needs to be done differently. And with that, I'll shut up because, as you know, Ralph, I can be pretty long-winded.
Well, we all can at one time or another, and that's why we're podcasters. That's a good idea, being long-winded in this biz. But I don't mind it when I'm talking to mavens. Ryan, Let me ask you what your take is on what Rich just said.
I absolutely agree that we have to do business differently. I went to a private, business university here in San Francisco, and I was, often dissatisfied with what I would learn just based on, the neoclassical approach to capitalism, based on competitive advantage, right? We've seen where the world is, in terms of income inequality and the environment, where capitalism has got us here today and competitive advantage. So, I agree with Rich. The future of business, I think we're going to have to evolve and, more towards cooperative and collaborative advantage. So one thing I'd like to see is that we change the policy in terms of multiple licenses sharing a single address, right? That would enable more small businesses to cooperate and collaborate in the marketplace to better compete with the bigger investors.
I'm going to ask you guys both, and this is almost a rhetorical question. Does it come down to, has it always and will it always come down to big business against small business? Safeway against the mom and pop grocer that lets you have a cookie, that kind of thing. Gentlemen.
Yeah, I'll just throw it out there because it's not a long-winded thing for me for a change.
Please talk. Feel free to talk. Use these airwaves to talk as long as you want. You are, as I say, a maven, and the longer you talk, the more we learn. So look at it from that standpoint.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you, but I do thank you. But
right.
Regarding that, there'll always be big and small business. Look at anything we like. Coffee, global business, but locally it's both big and small. Alcohol, beer, all these things are the same. There will always be large and small in cannabis. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, the lack of choice is a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm. So if big business is driving out small business in total, pretty much, if the cupboards are bare, I'm willing to bet that the cupboards may not be bare over at Harborside, for instance.
In fact, I just looked this morning, as a matter of fact, because my favorite dispensary here is Magnolia. And just out of curiosity, I haven't been to Harborside in ages, but I looked, and I was surprised at the selection. Not calling them necessarily a big business, but the other thing people, I think, forget is...
Well, I'm not calling them a small business. They're probably the largest medical dispensary
for
cannabis in California or the world.
But remember, though, we who are more involved in various aspects of this community have somewhat of a community-driven view. And what I mean by that is we spend a lot of time with people who are in similar aspects of ourselves in this community, where the general cannabis consumer, and I think about this a lot, there'll always be a Budweiser or a Miller market. Personally, I like really small, microbreweries, but there'll always be that market out there. And in cannabis, reflective of the general society, there will always be a cost-conscious, easy-access consumer, and we shouldn't forget about that. But like you said, if the big guy is leveraging his weight to cut out the small guy, that's no good. In professional boxing, or I don't watch UFC, but I assume it might be the same, there's weight classes. So that a bigger physical person, or in this case business, doesn't just wipe out the smaller person. It's not the strongest survive. This is applicable in all markets. And I think that needs to be addressed without losing the fact that there will always be a general desire for easy access, low cost, and that means large corporate weed.
Okay. That's kind of depressing because, again, if these big companies, I have no ill will towards Harborside in any way. Ryan, we met at Harborside, as a matter of fact. so I'll always be indebted to their existence. How do you feel about this?
Thank you, Ralph. Well, big business, right? Ain't that America? Right? So I think it's sort of, it's interesting, right, that a lot of folks in this community are concerned about big business. I'm concerned about it also. But really, I think what my work with veterans helps us do is kind of find the silver lining in everything, right? And so with big business, there's going to come a lot of innovation, right? A lot of innovation, a lot more research, and so a lot more possibility, I think, in terms of national normalization and even global, right? Even export, import, and what that could do. Also, I think what's important, what Rich was talking about is the demand of the consumer that we have to be mindful of. And yes, there is going to be a demand for, the Coors Light of cannabis, right? But like Rich, well, I don't drink anymore, but I never really did like, the Coors Light sort of style approach.
Ryan, I have to ask you, do you drink any less?
I don't drink at all. I've
okay.
decided that's the best decision for my trajectory, and so essentially,
excuse my play on words.
Sure. So, but exactly what I would say to that is that there's always going to be a demand for small craft cannabis, right? Small batch, farm to table. Folks want to have a relationship with their farmers. There was always going to be that demand in California, and I believe that preference. So there'll be a place for everyone.
We scofflaws need not fret, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is let's not underestimate the power of the California consumer, and it's up to the consumer, right, to make that decision whether they want to spend the extra dollar or two for the pre-roll that comes from a local small farmer. And so we have the power to vote not only for initiatives every 2 to 4 years, but we vote every day with how we use our dollar, whether we do go to the smaller dispensary like Magnolia or the larger dispensary like Harborside. There's going to be opportunities for everyone.
Blum is another one that's large and getting larger. I just don't want to see the disparity between the small guy and the big guy become too much. Like your analogy, Rich, was beautiful about the boxer. One boxer weighs 280 and the other one weighs 140. You have to have weight classifications, and it is up to the consumer to make that decision where he or she wishes to put their gelt. How about that?
And I think just before, if you don't mind, just before we move on, Ralph, a lot of folks are concerned about the small business and the small farmer. And what do, right? They organize and advocate, speak truth to power, acting as agents of change. One thing that's exciting to learn about is the California Growers Association is litigating on behalf of the small farmer. There was the big level 5 licenses that weren't supposed to be available for 5 years to allow small farmers and small businesses to establish a foothold in the marketplace. However, that was released, and these level 5 licenses are currently available. So what do? We organize and we advocate. We resist, essentially.
And I just want to tag in on that because, Ryan, I think you're 100% right. We found that here in Alameda. Then we actually did this as citizens, statewide. This wasn't legislation they wrote. So if it's been changed to a way that is not satisfactory to us, the only way we know what us is to organize and have a solid voice. So I 100% support that, and I'm personally hoping that cannabis and people's involvement in this cannabis issue turns into a leapfrog into the citizens being much more active in the day-to-day running of their government. Certainly not really practically at a state level, but at the local level. because I see once people understand that they can change laws even after they've been manipulated, and that's what's so great about California's Growers Association filing this. Even though this was done, we have another shot. And so I agree, organization and having the people speak with a unified voice is, in my personal opinion, sounds like yours, the solution.
Absolutely.
And tell us about that shot for a second chance that you're participating in Alameda. First start with how the powers that be in Alameda treated legalization, despite the fact that more than two-thirds, 68% of the voters who voted and resided in Alameda voted for legalization of recreational cannabis. And I stopped myself there, Ryan. You have an indelible print on my mind now. You have a lever. And I said cannabis instead, so thank you again. And please proceed in educating us as to what went down and what we're doing to combat what the powers that be have presented us. We really had no choice. And what's being done? Alameda, California, Rich Moskowitz.
So thanks for that, Ralph. Just briefly, I would say that many cities in California were given a short amount of time to really grapple with this new issue for their citizens. And most places in California did not have the clear majority that Alameda did at over two-thirds. In fact, the state, I believe, was 56%. So in most places, I think the administrators, the city councils, they're struggling with the basic question of how do I regulate this new industry? What does it impact my town? All these things that we charge our representatives with. In the case of Alameda, our mayor put forth a referral to lift the ban that California cities recommended a couple of years ago. We won't go down that road. It's kind of a quagmire. And also lift the ban on sale of all cannabis in any way. We never allowed that in Alameda in any way for the last 8 years since it was first attempted. So in our case, last year, we mobilized the local community, and we were able to fight a lot of the pushback from city council. And we wound up basically with regulations for cannabis businesses in Alameda that included 2 medical dispensaries that were allowed to do local delivery, as well if they choose to have on-site consumption of cannabis that was purchased in that time frame at that spot without leaving the building. And they could do that through vaporization. We also had the ability for 2 labs, 1 nursery, and why is the 4th one escaping me? 4 manufacturing permits. So what they refused to talk about from the beginning was any adult use regulation. Now, in Alameda's specific case, I think our city council, while being extremely progressive in the last 2 years, or that's actually a terrible word. I'm learning to hate that word, to be honest with you. It's too wide an umbrella, and people throw it around too lightly. The city council in the last 2 years has really started to reflect the population, and we're a very diverse, very young population. Unfortunately, as with every council, it's a divided council.
Me notwithstanding, gentlemen.
Exactly, and it's a divided council, and in this case, even though our mayor fully wanted recreational cannabis to be available to the citizens and now currently go to Harborside and Magnolia, it wasn't a part of the fight that could be won. It was basically 4-1 against. And I think in our case, our city council has taken a position of treating the citizenry like teenagers. They are deciding what is right for us when the state has said, as an adult, we have that ability. So that all happened, and I'm actually glad to say that.
And the people have decided a certain way. They voted a certain way. Where is pure representation, and what are you going to do directly to combat the fact that we're not getting representation from these people?
Well,
long and short of it.
Perfect. Thanks for the soft pitch there, my friend who loves baseball so much. But honestly, where it comes from, or where it comes down to, is that first I'd like to say the city signed this law. You know, we passed it in November, signed in December. As of 3 days ago, they released the RFP regulations, you know, so for cannabis businesses. Now, next week, the city council still has to pass those, and it'll be rubber stamped. It might even be on the consent calendar if I was one to guess. But so within 2 months, they produced the regulations, so that's much to their credit. Now, unfortunately, let's go back to adult use and what the population wants. So it's very clear that the population of the city of Alameda wanted adult use sales in the state of California. And one could fairly easily extrapolate that they would not want to leave the island to engage in this activity that they voted for. So
May I interject something? Say that somebody leaves the island for legal purchase of adult use marijuana across the moat. They're in Oakland, or maybe they go to San Francisco. However, and something bad happens to them, not cannabis related perhaps, could be anything. Don't you think a smart lawyer is going to come back at the city and say, you forced my client, the newly formed vegetable, to cross that moat, and it was not a representation of what he or she and the rest of the folks wanted, and we're going to hold you liable for damages. Could that very well happen?
Without being a lawyer, I don't know, but let me tell you what we're doing to prevent that scenario from occurring.
Okay.
So because of all this, and even that, if somebody's going to leave the island for recreational, and you know, as Alamedans, that's something we don't like to do for any reason. Basically, it's our intent now to put a ballot measure on the ballot, and the way we wrote the law, it's pretty interesting. The dispensaries are the only ones that are technically tagged as medicinal, because that's really one of the big breakdowns. It's the retail aspect. It's on the street. It's in the community space. So it says medicinal. So we're going to put a ballot measure on the ballot if we can gather enough signatures. And it is going to be simply to remove the word medicinal from our current law. And what that will accomplish is those dispensaries now will be able to sell both recreational and medicinal. They'll be able to deliver both recreational and medicinal, and there'll be on-site consumption for both recreational and medicinal. So right now, we were also considering adding locally owned delivery services for that. In fact, when we drafted the NOI, the Notice of Intent, we included locally owned delivery services because that's something the city council failed to do. And yet the only difference for a delivery service is that's fine for Alameda, except if it happens to be based here. We won't allow it to be based here. So it seems crazy not to take that tax money and not to support local small business. But more importantly, we just want to remove the word medicinal, allow recreational. And after the first year of the law, the city's committed to look at increasing the diversity and scope, the number and scope of permits that are available, as well as continue to move forward on the equity program, which was also referenced in the law. So there is good news afoot, and basically that process, we're just looking for a little help to write the actual verbiage for the ballot measure. The NOI is done. And once we submit, we'll be in the signature gathering process to get on the ballot in November. And then hopefully, at least for Alameda, we can start, A, activating the people, B, as you referenced, more importantly, perhaps be the catalyst for certain city council members to come into the 21st century and not keep their views in the 20th century. And most importantly, hopefully instruct the council that when they don't listen to the electorate and their job is to represent the electorate, then the electorate will speak with their own voice. And that potentially could have
That has to be at the ballot box. That's the only
Absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. And, 2018, every 2 years, we always have a couple of board seats available, which means that this is going to be another election year. And I don't know if you've been following the local blog Merry-Go-Round, but they spoke about 2 of our 4 council members who, are currently under investigation. Actually, I believe
this
that
is a non-cannabis regulation, investigation, rather. However, I think that those who don't represent the people's overwhelming, if it was like 53%, 54%, this is 68% sports fans. That's a lot of votes. If they don't represent us, that's a crime. They have to be looked at by the Attorney General, who's inducing them not to represent us, because they swore that they would. They took an oath to do that, and if they're not, you always have to follow the money. You always have to look, are there offshore accounts? Because there's an awful lot of people that would prefer, big people, big businesses that would, the drug industry, for instance. Do they want to sell aspirins at CVS or have doctors prescribe all these harmful drugs? Or do they want somebody to go home and get mellow and they don't profit at all? And would they take money out of their pocket and transfer it to those in power? I don't know. It should be investigated. We're not being represented. Must be a reason. Something's enticing them. They didn't all of a sudden become liars because they swore to represent us. Does that say?
Well,
I'll ask Ryan how you feel about that. You just see things from both sides, Ryan, and I so much appreciate it. What do you say when I say that? What do you think? Am I on the right track on some level?
Well, I would, it's important to look at the incentives that politicians are given to operate, right? I think we need some things like campaign finance reform would be a great place to start. Right? So that
absolutely.
Folks do
Why is
represent
it, and
the people
this isn't
more.
just in Alameda, and I can go back to SunCal, and you could just go, well, it isn't. But it's in all city, state, and federal positions, federal elected positions. You come in and you're fighting for money, and you go out and you're a millionaire.
We can have a whole segment on campaign finance reform or corruption in politics. So.
Absolutely. That needs to be addressed. I'm addressing it specifically to the powers that be in Alameda. I think what they did to us and what they did to poor Trish, the mayor, who worked so hard on this and had to swallow her pride just to get something through. And I think that was a slap in the face, and these folks need to be accounted for, accounted to. I don't know. Proper grammar is not up my alley. But something does not smell right about all of this.
So I know disagree by any means, Ralph, but maybe being inspired by Ryan, I would say that let's not also lose focus, though, that we, the people, those three words, that's it. All these people that you're talking about, whatever their motivations or whatever incentives they have financially, personally, whatever, even if it's just doing good, like point out Barbara Lee, perhaps. But the point is, let's not forget the we the people part, because if you find that enough people feel like you, then we change it. And this is perhaps one of my biggest things. I touched on it earlier. The little guy in America has taken it on the chin for a very long time, to the point where we're all in a very similar age bracket. We've all basically come to understand that the rules are for the rich and for the big businesses, and we've come to accept that. But here's the funny thing. History is an amazing teacher. Businesses, when the country started, didn't have an automatic right to do business. They had to have their permits renewed by the people every year. If they did good, they would be renewed. If they did bad, they would be not renewed. And that wasn't based solely on the bottom line. That was based on the thoughts of the community. We move forward a couple hundred years. We have Citizens United, right? Corporations are people. So here's the interesting thing. We are the people. We make the rules. We forgot that. Luckily, 2017, through horrible experiences, taught a lot of us a lot of things. And for me, it started with the Me Too movement. It continued on. Ralph, you and I have talked about this before privately. It continued on thinking, okay, a few of these turd balls who've come out or been exposed, we're like, oh, they're the 1% of the weirdos. Then we keep coming out with more people, and we find out, wow, us sane people are actually the 1%. And there's a lot of crap men. But I'm not pointing that out. I'm pointing out what happened. Women across the country throughout 2017 came together, reclaimed power, and what did we see as a result? We saw a wave of step-downs. Now, we're not saying if anybody's guilty or innocent, but I'm pretty sure you walk away from a $2 million job, and there's probably a reason. So that's the takeaway that inspired me, quite honestly. And bringing it back home, let's not forget with the scenario, we the people, the women, once again, have led the way, and we should follow this. If you don't like what's happening in your local town, get together, remember that they serve you, and change it. First, you change it by contacting and expressing your opinion. Then you change it by asking them to put forward what you want to see. And when that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen to your satisfaction, that's when you go to the ballot. And at the same time, you can also look at your representatives and decide if they're worthy of your vote. So I'm not here to change the nature of American politics, that takes better minds than myself to solve election reform and other things like that, money and politics. But what I am here is the practical lesson. The easy lesson is if we don't like it, organize and just express with a single voice, and it will lead to change. And that's what we're doing here.
And fight for term limits, too, wherever you are.
Absolutely.
That would help quite a bit. Because if they're not worried about being reelected so much as they are in serving, then maybe we can get some service. How about that?
Would you think about running for, in Alameda, a lot of people go from the school board up or a few of the other well-known boards as their path toward city council. But you once asked me, now I'll ask you publicly, would you consider becoming more involved?
I would consider, because I'm so truthful. I have nothing in my past, nothing that I ever said that isn't me. I would consider that, of course, from that standpoint. I think it would be preposterous to have someone with my lack of education, for instance, but that's another thing. No one's going to ask. But I would, only because I know that I'm not hiding anything. And not that there isn't stuff to hide. You can go back on things. Whoa, I've made decisions in the course of a lifetime that have been horrendous. But at least I could say that. I don't back it up things that I've done just to be backing them up, just not to be wrong. You know what the trouble is? And this is in business, sports, politics. A general manager could trade a player and it works out horribly. He'll always say, well, the trade didn't work out well, but you have to remember this and that. Just say, I screwed up. People cannot say, I made a mistake. That's the first thing. It's a human frailty. As if you make a mistake, it's such a horrible thing. That's the key to it all. And I don't think that given the way the city council, for instance, handled this, especially now, there's a big thing. One of the schools, Lum School, is located in an earthquake fault or low sand or whatever the hell it is, and it's a school located right next to another school that they don't even talk about. So if this school's in danger, the other school's in danger. It's going to take millions to fix Lum School. And they're complaining, wow, we need a tax initiative for this. Why don't they just make a recreational thing like Harborside, give them a branch of Harborside, whatever, they're doing such a great job. Let them do a great job in Alameda. Accept their tax dollar. Say, we were wrong. We thought about it. We didn't represent the people, and we really didn't do well by the city because we left tax dollars lying on the table. We screwed up. We made a mistake. We hired the wrong consultants to come in. Or we let our personal preferences get in the way. We're only human. We made a mistake. You'll hear that when pigs fly. That's my editorial rant. Am I correct?
I would certainly be one who would applaud common sense and community politics, for sure.
Okay. All right. You could also see why they ain't electing me. They don't want to hear that.
The last time a politician that I remember changed his opinion publicly, the term wishy-washy was used. And I believe it was Bill Clinton. I always said after that, that's really funny that they call it wishy-washy. When I learn new information and change my opinion, I call that growth.
Very good point. Very, very good point. Clinton wasn't the only person in history they called wishy-washy. When they go from here to there. But he's a very good example. He learned something. You change. I don't have the same belief system that I had when I was, say, 35 last year. Maybe I'm not entirely honest. This has been a great show, ladies and gentlemen, out there, and gentlemen in here. I'm appreciative of your time. Ryan on a regular basis. And Rich has been a regular guest on these airwaves. Anything you want to add to it, Ryan?
Not at all. Thank you for your work out there in Alameda, and thank you for having me.
Okay, I very much appreciate it. And next week you produce the show. You let it run any way you want, Ryan. You're the man.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. We'll be back
Hey,
next
Ralph?
week. Rich, I'm so appreciative. Yes.
Oh, my pleasure. I just wanted to say if anybody's listening and they'd like to track what's happening in Alameda as we move towards signature gathering and hopefully getting the petition on the ballot, they could always look for the Facebook group Alameda Cannabis Times Act.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know, the whole world revolves around Facebook these days. It's a terrific medium, really, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's just a great way to, I think personally anyway, to communicate to a community quickly and easily. So, as I say, if anybody's interested, just search us out on Facebook and join the group.
Beautiful. This is Canna Zone. Oh, one last thing. Our executive producer, Tally Olson, a recent graduate of the prestigious Oaksterdam University in Oakland, was just notified last week that she graduated with valedictorian honors. And we are so proud of her at Comfortably Zoned Radio Network and individually, I'm kvelling, as they say. She's terrific in every way. She makes it all happen. Tally, congratulations. Well deserved. You studied hard, and you're incredibly bright. Thanks to her. Thanks to everybody that listens. If you listen and enjoy, even if you don't enjoy so much, you listened, right? Give you a chance for that. Box up some lightly used children's books and take them down to the Head Start program in whatever community you live. They are much needed. Kids need to read for a variety of reasons. Not the least, you develop a passion when you read for whatever it is you read. You become school ready. You take your nose out of the devices and the computer, and you have fun doing it. Give your books lovingly, lightly used children's books, Head Start program. I'm Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The host of the show is Ryan Miller. The prestigious guest is Rich Moskowitz. We're out of here. See you guys.